Welcome back to WagerTalk.com. We're going to shift gears, head to Saturday college basketball. We've got a good one in the Pac-12 conference. We've got Arizona traveling in to play UCLA. I'll start with you, Preston, and I'll set this up with what we're making the line here. We asked you your power rating and where you set the number at. We also asked our good friend Matt Holt from CG Technology, and then Ralph and myself chimed in, and we're kind of all over the place on this one. You make this line 7.5?
Yeah, 7.5 is my number. And I mean, honestly, I gave home court in college basketball, in particular to UCLA this year, is 4. So on a neutral, I think UCLA is about 3.5 points better than Arizona. And I mean, I think that's where we differ, obviously. I know, Ralph, and you think Arizona's slightly better, or you're trying to maybe beat that UCLA regression, which is probably inevitable to a degree. I know they haven't covered, most of their games recently. The one thing that I really like about the Bruins is coming into the year, Lonzo Ball, the big recruit, came out of the high school where all they do is just run and chuck threes, and they press you and pressure. And they wanted to try to adopt some of that and bring it to UCLA. And they did, and you saw it early on. They were putting up 100+ in multiple games. Where I really gained respect and learned how good this team can be is in one of the holiday tournaments, or it might have even been earlier than that. They played Nebraska and Texas A&M, both quality teams, in low-scoring, kind of grinded-out games, and won both of those by 8 to 11 points, I think. And I learned this team can play any style of ball. A week later they went into Kentucky and ran up and down and upset them on the road. I mean, they can play any type of basketball you want, and they might be better at it than the opposition at all times. And if you get into a running game with them, then obviously you're drawing dead. But a team like Arizona, they're going to try to slow it down, limit the possessions. But UCLA's, they've played that type of game before. I don't think that's necessarily something that is going to be I guess deteriorating from their value or just their talent and their skill, and ultimately the results of their games.
Ralph, you and I look at this one the same, have the number around 4.5. How are you looking at this UCLA-Arizona matchup?
I like the dog here. And it could be that's why my number's a little lower. I tend to downgrade the number. I want to make sure I'm on the right side of it. I'll certainly be on Arizona plus the touchdown. But, the dog 10-1 in the series, a lot of close games. If you look at the total combined score of these two in the last 9 games, it's only 1 point difference scored. When you look at their common opponents this year, both teams played Stanford, Cal. They played Colorado, Utah, and both played A&M. Oregon was plus 67 points, UCLA plus 47 points. UCLA is my number 1 offense in the Wager Talk Guide. We'll talk about that, so I completely agree. And what impressed me even more than beating Kentucky early in the years was when they went into Oregon and had that lead and just lost it late. But that was as impressive. But you know what? Arizona is a top 25 offense, a top 12 defense, 3-0 straight up in ATS on the road. And remember, this UCLA team only won 15 games last year. They're still learning how to win. They're still learning how to play these close games. Arizona's been there and done that. This basically is for the second number 1 seed in the West. Give 1 to Gonzaga. Yeah. This could be the other number 1 seed. Incredibly, the West is a power this year, but I like the dog plus the points.
Yeah, I like the dog here too, and I'm going to look at it from a couple aspects. One, I like the scheduling setup on this game to start with. Arizona had a week off. Now they're going to play tomorrow night. They played their rivalry game with Arizona, and they always schedule those games. That's the only game they play that week when they play their rival. So they've had a week off. They play tomorrow night at Arizona State, at USC. And then they'll go short trip to UCLA on Saturday. So I like the fact that this is the second game off of missing a week, because sometimes that week off can work both ways. It can be, a little bit of rust factor, not playing in a week, you break your routine, but having the game on Thursday gets them back into a rhythm, sets them up for this one. Defensively, you mentioned it, they're a top 12 defensive team. This team has held 6 of their last 9 opponents to 38% or less from the field. UCLA is going to have to work for their buckets in this one. As you said, they do adjust. They played a couple games where the tempo of the game was different than they'd like to have it, and they were able to do it. But I also think in going to the last spot where I said when we were talking about our numbers in the break, UCLA early on I think was very underrated, and they were just rolling it with the point spread. Now they're 1-6 the last 7. I think Vegas has caught up to them, and after the big Kentucky win, I think that the pendulum just swung so far the other way that now we're trying to get it back to the sweet spot. Probably you're at 4.5, I'm at 4.5, you guys are at 7 and 7.5. It's probably going to come out at 6, and we'll both be right. But we'll see where this is at. I see this as a 1 to 3 point game. Either way, if I get over 4.5, I'm going to look at the dog, and this one is where I'm at. So
Great stuff.
there you go, guys. Wrap that one up, and don't forget, coupon code this weekend, Packers 10. Save yourself $10 on any package this week at wagertalk.com. We're going to be back with more. Ralph and I are going to talk about his weekly guide that you can get for free at Wager Talk. That's up next. Wager Talk TV.